We just saw an explosion of Airlines. It was about 16,000 feet or something like that. It just went down.
TWA was one of the biggest airlines in the US and operated from 1930 to 2001. On the evening of July 17, 1996, Transworld Airlines TWA Flight 800 was a scheduled flight from New York JFK to Rome, with a stop in Paris. It was operated by a Boeing 747-100 aircraft with the registration November 93119. It was a 24-year-old aircraft with 16,869 hours. On the first leg from JFK to Paris, the crew did not face any abnormality. However, when the aircraft was in Rome at the gate, the crew identifies an issue with the reverse thrust sensors on engine number 3. TWA Flight 800 was refueled, and from Paris to Rome, the 747 was operating under capacity, so the pilots decided to fill up only the wing tanks, leaving the center main tank, also known as the belly tank, empty. The plane was parked at Gate 27 with the APU and the air conditioning packs running on the hot day. The flight carried 212 passengers and 18 crew members. This included a flight deck crew of 4, headed by Captain Rolfe, who had flown for TWA for 31 years. Co-pilot is Captain Steve, who is also a Czech airman and has flown for TWA for 32 years. The third crew member is a 64-year-old flight engineer and has flown for TWA for 30 years. Also a 25-year-old trainee flight engineer who just joined 26 days ago. The flight is delayed because of the reverse thrust sensor issue on engine number 3, and due to this, the maintenance personnel locked the number 3 engine reverser and the cables were also replaced. Also, the fuel operator faces a problem with the automatic cutoff system, which is designed to prevent overfilling of the tanks. During the refueling process, the volumetric shutoff valve, also known as the VSO, triggers before the tanks were full. So in order to finish the required amount of fuel, the TWA mechanic overrides the fuse and continues fueling. Keeping in mind, only the wing tanks were fueled, leaving the center tank empty. The flight was also delayed due to a passenger and baggage mismatch. Once that was resolved, the crew started preparations for the departure, and at 19:02, TWA started to move from the gate. At time 2015, TWA enters the runway, and at time 2018, the ATC clears them for takeoff on runway 22 right. The Boeing 747, known as the Queen of the Skies, can accommodate more than 400 passengers, but TWA 800 was carrying only 212 passengers, leaving it in half capacity. It took off from JFK and began its climb to cruising altitude. Just 10 minutes into the flight, at time 2029, the captain spots the fuel indicator on engine 4 showing fluctuations, but it doesn't get their attention and they continue with the flight. The last received transmission was at time 2030 when the crew acknowledged Boston Center's instruction to climb to 15,000 feet when they were at 13,000. About a minute after the transmission at 13,800 feet, the plane encounters a massive explosion. Because the explosion was so severe, it fractured the entire nose section and it started to crack. After the explosion, the nose section with the cabin seats of the upper and lower deck rips off the entire airplane. It shifted the center of gravity to the rear, which made up a pitch-up moment. The airplane initially climbs up steeply and eventually stalls and falls like a rock in the water. Just a few minutes after the last transmission by TWA Flight 800, ATC began receiving reports from other aircraft about hearing or seeing an explosion in the area. The first of these came from an East Airlines Boeing 737, where the pilot reported,
We just saw an explosion of Airlines. It was about 16,000 feet or something like that. It just went down to the water.
Boston Virgin 009, I can confirm that out of my 9 o'clock position. We just had like an explosion out there about 5 miles away, 6 miles away.
TWA 800, center, TWA 800, the air center ident. He should be right underneath you. They reported the splashdown right underneath you, about 12 and 4 miles.
Still burning down there.
In the water?
There's fire
Coming to the investigation, concerns of an attack were initially justified by the investigation. Eyewitnesses reported what looked like a flare or firework heading towards the plane. There was also US Navy missile test activity in the area at that time. This could have been a terrorist attack or the result of a horrible accident. Everyone was wondering what could be the cause of the explosion. How did the aircraft crash? After extensive investigations, reconstructions of the wreckage and simulations were then carried out to determine the cause of the mid-air explosion. The NTSB eventually concluded that the explosion was the result of an explosion of fuel-air vapor in the center wing fuel tank. If you remember earlier in the video, the flight crew had left the center tank empty. Almost all commercial aircraft are equipped with wing fuel tanks that aid the aircraft in stability and efficient fuel routing to the wing-mounted engines. The center wing fuel tank on a Boeing 747 sits in the belly between the two wings. Directly below the tanks are the air conditioning packs which generate a large amount of heat. Now this could be a cause of the explosion. If you remember, I told you that the aircraft sat with the APU and the AC running for over an hour. The NTSB believed that the heat caused by the air conditioning packs was likely to have overheated the fuel tank. Moreover, the fuel residue obtained during the investigation from the center fuel tank showed a mixture of liquid fuel and fuel-air vapor. At high temperatures, the fuel-air vapor is highly flammable and only requires a single source of ignition or spark. If you remember, the captain observed the fluctuation in fuel indication on engine number 4. The fuel quantity indication system in the center wing fuel tank provides the pilot with a visual representation of the fuel available in the tanks. The NTSB determines that the probable cause of the TWA Flight 800 accident was an explosion of the center wing fuel tank, resulting from ignition of the flammable fuel-air mixture in the tank. However, the most likely but not concluded cause was explained as a short circuit outside the fuel tank that caused excessive voltage to penetrate the tank. The only wiring inside the central tank of the 74700 is for the fuel quantity indication system. This is normally kept as a very low voltage, but a short caused by the damaged wiring could have increased this. Arcing of this wiring was also found.